some people, I know some people like to watch the recordings when they miss out. Conversation is always terrific with this group. Term is over, but we are continuing. I know it seems a little funny, like we kind of like had a lead into Purim, but it's still relevant, and it would still be relevant to learn the Megillah, and I certainly wouldn't want to stop in the middle. I want to remind people that we were taking a break between chapter 2 and chapter 3 and taking a step back. I will share the screen as I find my source sheet. And we were looking at sources and talking about anti-Semitism in general before we introduced Haman, whose first appearance, overt appearance, remember we had Midrashim, that's he was Memuchan. But the first overt appearance of the name Haman appears in chapter 3. If people could put themselves on mute when they're not speaking, because there's some feedback and I don't know who it's from. I think it's just from you, Carol. You can just for a moment go on mute, but of course unmute if you have something to say. We always love to hear when people have something to say. And here we go. Somebody is still giving a lot of feedback. Let me, Carol, I have to put you on mute because it's kind of loud. Oh, thank you, Carol. Hello, everybody. I am on my phone because my computer had a catastrophic dying.
Ignore the message I left for you.
Yeah, no, I saw you left a message, but I knew I was just going to get on the phone because I couldn't. All right, friends, bear with me here. I am going to, I'm not going to be able to share the screen. That's the problem. But I will read to you my sources. Sorry about that. All right. We don't want to stop the class, so let's continue on. If you remember last time, just reminding you that I had a source sheet that I was showing on the screen. The first thing we read about was Rabbi Sachs, Covenant and Conversation, two types of hate. We spoke about anti-Semitism and xenophobia. And I'm not sure that this group agreed that it's two types of hate. And perhaps anti-Semitism is a form of xenophobia, which, oh, that's so funny. I just got a source from Rabbi Sachs, but a different one. But I would say that anti-Semitism stands on its own, although I guess you could say Islamophobia does as well. But anti-Semitism is a trope. As we said, it's an old trope, and it has been throughout the ages. I don't know if I shared with you that I went to an anti-Semitism training. Did I share that here? One of the things, and I did, it was at the UJA, it was for people who are Jewish as well as people who are not Jewish. And it was people of different color, different race, different, people with no background, people with some background. So at the beginning, when they were explaining what anti-Semitism is and where it began, I was like saying to myself, this is stuff I know. Maybe this training isn't for me. And I was real. Thank you, Richard. I think it's not going to help because I wasn't able to turn on. I'm just doing it on my phone and without sharing the screen in order to respect the time that people have come on here. So what they did, one of the things they did was to say that throughout the ages, and they showed a picture of a map of Europe, and then they showed through different centuries pink dots, which showed how many places, the actual locations during that century that Jews were either expelled or had pogroms. Anything else we could say? Pogroms, expulsion. I think those were the two main ones. Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate it. Yeah. Did you see it? They had a catastrophic, I think. And then they did that through each century. And then they took the 8 or 10 centuries and superimposed. There were like 850 dots. It filled the map. I wish I had that slide that they put together. Even for me, who seemingly knows about anti-Semitism and read about and learned about it. It was so powerful for me. And by the way, I cannot see everybody at the same time. So because it's a phone. So if you have something to say, please feel free to unmute and just interrupt me. Politely interrupt me. I just won't be able to see you. So if you don't mind doing that, I would appreciate it. You know how important it is for me that people speak. So even this shows that anti-Semitism, you could call it xenophobia, but it is such a particular type of xenophobia, being afraid of the other, of something that is strange, and it is so rampant and has come up so many times that it deserves, sadly, to have its own name. Well, what's interesting to me is that Semite is actually not just Jewish. Isn't that correct? Semitic is also what? Middle Eastern. And yet anti-Semitism does not include Muslims and Arabs at this point. And anti-Semitism is equivalent to anti-Jewish. Now, that's putting aside the anti-Zionism. Like, I don't need to get into that. I could, but I don't need to yet. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it. I know Rabbi Weiss wrote a powerful piece about it. People may have read it. Just 1 second. Oh, that's yummy. Okay, so I would argue that Rabbi Sachs has a very valid point that anti-Semitism exists on its own, separate from xenophobia. And that was where we spoke about blood libels. He writes, it's a paradigm case of irrational hatred. I mean, it's a paradigm case. So is xenophobia. That's also irrational hatred. In the Middle Ages, Jews were accused of poisoning wells, spreading the plague, and the blood libel. Can I have that book? Do you mind? Marvin actually was very interested in blood libel. He shared with me. People can see this. Can people see the book on the screen? It's hard for me to spotlight, so I'm not going to do it right now. Maybe it isn't hard to spotlight. Maybe I can spotlight easily.
I don't even know if I'm the host. Helen, can you see if I'm the host?
No,
Our
you're
turn.
not the host. Vivian's the host.
Oh, Vivian, can you make me the host? Is that possible? Do you know how to do that? Probably not. Anyway. Okay. All right, it doesn't matter, Vivian. I don't want you to get confused. Anyway, this is called The Blood Libel Legend, a casebook in anti-Semitic folklore. There is a reason that this book was written because look how many pages it fills. It has a lot of material. The blood libel, which has literally zero, it has nothing in fact. It doesn't come from anywhere except somebody made it up. And other people said, oh, that sounds good. That's a good reason to hate the Jews. So no, people didn't say that's ridiculous. It's based on nothing. Why are you doing this? It's a paradigmatic case of anti-Semitism. Everybody with me on that? So I would agree. Thank you so much, Marvin. If Marvin at some point wants to, he could summarize us. He spent a lot of time researching. If he ever wants to, if we get to that, because if he wants to speak about blood libel, but he did bring the book in for people to see. I don't know if I want to get that depressed by reading the whole book, just saying. So I would say, and what Rabbi Sachs says, anti-Semitism is the supreme irrationality of the age of reason. The suspicion of killing Christian children to use their blood to make matzot for Pesach is so self-evidently impossible, but it didn't stop people from believing it. Now, I don't have an answer, Highlands. I don't have an answer to that, why people believe it. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around why people want to believe things that make no sense and that have no basis in reality and what that gives them. And I keep hearing about people talking. Last night I was at a support for Richie Torres. Do people know Richie Torres here? He's our congressman. He's wonderful. He has been just a staunch supporter, but there are very few supporter of the Jews, seeing reality. He says, I don't look for friends to love me. I don't need the I need to be true to my values. That's much more important to me. And I can't, I'm not looking for popularity. I'm looking for, I can't remember, it was something that rhymed with popularity, but it was, about being true to himself and to his values and what he sees as, it's okay. Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate it. Richard actually brought me one, but thank you so much. It's okay. You didn't see it. I know you have to look at that all the time. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Gerard. I appreciate it. He brought an extension cord, but that didn't help. So wait, where was I? Oh, so at the, there were also college kids from 3 campuses, from Columbia, from Penn, and from Harvard. And they were talking about what's going on the campuses. And it's, and one of them said at one point, he said, on one hand, the Jews are being accused of controlling everything, the universities, the Hollywood. Second. Oh, I can't mute people. Okay. Hollywood and business and money and banks and everything. And on the other hand, our vote isn't large enough to sway politicians who are looking for, let's say, the Muslim vote or the anti-Semitic vote, which has many more numbers. It's like, that makes no sense. On one hand, we're so big that we control everything. How can you believe both pieces? How can you believe that we're so powerful and so big that we control everything? And on the other hand, our vote isn't even large enough to that. So there is a lot of irrationality. Yes, please, Debbie.
Well, it's interesting is just recently in Rochester, I don't know whether you've noticed this, Karen and Helen or whoever else, there was a cartoon. Did you see this cartoon? Did you see the cartoon? Anyways, incredibly anti-Semitic cartoon. There was at our city town, I think it was county building or city building, I'm not sure. They rose an Israeli flag after October 6th. And it was ripped down, and they put it up again, and it was ripped down, and ripped down. Anyway, the cartoon showed the head of the Jewish Federation in Rochester dressed as a domitress and with a whip in her hand, and very sexual, and with her foot on the back of the county executive, Adam Bello, with him having a bare butt. And there's somebody else there, and I can't remember who that was. And it was talk about it was clearly a Nazi cartoon. I mean, there was no doubt about it. And the guy who drew it was aligned. I don't know whether the Green Party didn't support him, but he is a cartoonist who often draws for that. And also, no, I mean, Meredith Dragon, who is the name of the woman who's the head of our Jewish Federation, doesn't have any power really in the city. She can't do anything. She doesn't have, she doesn't have a constituency. She doesn't have, she was there saying they were going to make a proclamation, and I think they did pass it actually, for a ceasefire. She was there, expressing her point of view, but it morphed into this really anti-Semitic,
Wow.
crazy meme.
Meme. I think that should be sent to any organization that deals, whether it's ADL or others, maybe UJA has, or other JCRC, different organizations, to see if what can be done and why was that allowed to be published.
Yeah, I have to research it. My sister saw it and exactly where it was, and but I did see the cartoon.
Yeah.
It was so it was so disgusting.
Yeah, really hard, and affects people's minds, and they're like, oh, obviously she has a lot of power, even though if they'd been in the meeting they would have seen that she doesn't. Yeah. All right, thank you for sharing that. So we spoke about the king of Egypt, who seemed to create this baseless argument that the Jews would multiply in Egypt, and they would rise up against the king and against Egyptians, and they would control Egypt and align with the enemies, whoever they are. But there was no basis to that. The Jews were not doing that, but he made up this accusation, and then that justified making them, in his mind and in his advisors' minds, that they should make them into slaves. The next source that we had was about Amalek, and we know that Haman, and I have things to share about that, but we're not up to that yet. But that'll be in actually the first pasuk in chapter 3. We'll have that Haman was from Amalek, and that's why we read about Amalek. The Shabbat, we just read about it on Shabbat, Pashat Zachor. We read about Amalek and eradicating Amalek completely. So actually, to intersperse that in our reading, who knows the story of Shaul, Saul, King Saul, not Solomon, but Saul. Who knows the story about King Saul, that he was supposed to kill the Amalek people? Does anybody here know that story? Nobody knows the story. Anybody know the story? Wants to share it? Anybody know? We have a class going here. Thank you. The story of King Saul was that he was commanded. Saul was our first king before David. Everybody aware of that? Shaul HaMelech, Saul, not Solomon, but Saul. So first was Saul, then was David, then was Solomon. Shaul, David, Shlomo. And Shaul was commanded by God through Samuel, commanded to kill when he was in battle with Amalek. He was told to kill everybody, the men, the women, the children. I don't want to go into if that makes sense to us, because I have nothing to discuss about that. But he was commanded to kill everybody and their livestock, which feels odd, because I don't know how you could pass any, bad Amalek seed through the livestock, but maybe it was a way of showing how much they have to be eradicated. And did he kill everybody? Did the Jewish army kill all the Amalekites? Anybody know? If anybody knows the story.
The king was
land
not
shaking
killed.
his head. Yeah. Who said that?
Helen, the king was not killed.
Yes, Helen says the king, and the king's name was
Agag.
Agag. Excellent. The king's name was Agag, and he was not killed. And by the way, the livestock was not killed. It says that the army had compassion on the livestock and on the king, why they would have compassion on the king of all people doesn't make sense. I could imagine having compassion on the women or on the children. I never understood that, but there was a reason for it that the commentators say, but that's not our story right now. So I don't need to look that up right now, although it is interesting. And he didn't assert his authority. King Saul did not assert his authority and force the death of King Saul and all the livestock. That's what he should have done. He shouldn't have said to his army, okay, the army decided to have compassion on the king and on the livestock, and therefore I have to assert my authority as king of Israel, who was commanded to eradicate and obliterate everybody. And he didn't do it. And actually, that's the reason the kingdom was taken away from him and in the end given to David. And who knows what happened to King Agag? Does anybody know what happened to King Agag?
Well,
Do you know? He was killed by Shmuel. Samuel hacked him to pieces or killed him in some way. But there's a midrash that says that he didn't do it till the next day. Well, I don't know if it's a midrash. The Gemara says, I guess you call it midrash. And that night, Agag, who maybe didn't know that he was going to be killed the next day, he slept with a woman, because remember, the whole Amalek was eradicated. And if we read the first pasuk, 1 second, Lance, you'll have to wait a minute. We read the first pasuk of chapter 3. I assume everybody brought a Megillat Esther. After these things happened, Gidal HaMelech, remember what was the last thing that happened, by the way? Was Mordechai told Esther about Bigtan and Teresh plotting to kill the king, and Esther told the king, and the king wrote it down in his Sefer HaZichronot, in his memory book. That was the last thing that happened. So I'm going to talk about Achar HaDvarim Ha'ele. Gidal HaMelech Hashverosh et Haman ben Hamdata HaAgagi. He raised up, promoted Haman, the son of Ben Hamedata, who was an Agagite, Vainaseo, and he raised him high. So how could it be that he was from Agag? We read but that Shaul's army killed everybody who was progeny, is that the right word? Progeny of Agag or any other Amalekite. And yet he is. So how could that happen? By the way, that's how the Midrash comes up, that Agag slept with a woman in the day in between, the night in between, when his army was eradicated and when Shmuel killed him. That woman became pregnant, and that is where Haman comes from. So that Midrash makes a lot of sense once you realize, when you juxtapose this pasuk with the story. Yes, Lance, what did you want to say?
Okay, I want to read you Deuteronomy 13, 15, and 16. May I?
Well, I think we did it last time. I have that in my source sheet. That is, oh no, I have Deuteronomy. Which Deuteronomy are you talking about?
Deuteronomy chapter 13, lines 15 and 16.
Okay, what is it about? Is it relevant to what we're talking about?
It's exactly relevant. It's a story you're just talking about. It's in the Torah.
Okay.
May I read it?
I guess, and we'll see if it's relevant.
Here we go. You shall put the inhabitants of that city to the sword, placing the city.
No, which city is that? Which city? That's a city. That's a different city. That's a there's a word for it.
Totally different city. But if you listen to the way God.
No, I know. 1 second. Can you just contextualize? It's not about Amalek. It's about an ear.
No, it's not about Amalek. No, I can't contextualize it because I just have the quote in front of me. I could if given time, but I'd rather read the quote if I may.
No, I know. Okay. But it's not. Okay, go on.
Okay, you shall put the inhabitants of that city to the sword, placing the city and all that is in it, even its livestock, under the ban. Having heaped up all its spoils in the middle of its square, you shall burn the city with all its spoils as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God.
Yeah, but I think this is talking about a city, I can't remember the phrase in Hebrew for some reason, which worships idols and that the whole city is corrupt. So you're saying it's the same punishment. I get that. That's fine. Amalek, I don't know if it was one city, it was a whole nation. So you're saying it's a similar punishment, but it's from different, and by the way, our teaching is that never happened. I thought that was talking about Jewish people, but I could be wrong. But thank you. But it's not about Amalek, but it's a similar punishment. It's a similar, not punishment. What's the word?
It mentions livestock.
No, I agree with you. You're saying it's the same actions, but it's not
Yes.
about Amalek. Okay,
And
great.
Saul lost his kingship, right?
That's what I said. Yep, he lost his kingship over that. Okay, so back to the, thank you. Back to the, so we see that the Torah is consistent. How's that? That's a good way to call it.
Yep.
Okay, so back to Haman. Now we know where Haman is coming from. Now it's interesting. There's a question here. Who would you expect that the king would raise up right after the story about Mordechai discovering Bigtan and Teresh?
Mordechai.
Right? You would expect that would be natural. After these events happened, it's almost like saying, no, Achashverosh did not raise up. Otherwise, why does it say Acharat Dvarim Ha'eleh? Usually the next verse is going to be after these things happen. It's like I'm saying, and so I taught my class, and then I had lunch, let's just say, or not then. And then the next pasuk would be, I had lunch. So I don't have to say, and after I finished the class, I had lunch, because it's obvious that it's going to be what happened. So where is that? And this is my own interpretation. After these things happen, when Mordechai is the one who discovered the plot, and he was believed, and Achashverosh made sure to write it down, why did Achashverosh raise up Haman? I find that an interesting question. And it's almost like the Megillah is forcing us to think about it and to show us, wait a minute, naturally, the king should have raised up Mordechai. Why didn't he raise up Mordechai? So there's a midrash, okay, that just saying, but let's just finish this pasuk. He raised him up. He put his chair, or his, what do you say, his seat in government, I would say, over everybody else who was there. And all of the servants of the king who were in the, this is verse 2, in Shar HaMelech at the gate, they have to bow down and prostrate themselves before Haman. I guess they did that anyway in front of the king, but they now have to do it for Haman. Because that's what the king commanded. Mordechai did not bow down and didn't prostrate himself. So we usually, and I'm going to go to that part, but there's a midrash that says that actually the king paid kind of lip service to Mordechai and said, you don't have to bow down to Haman because you were so loyal to me. You told me about Bigtan and Teresh. You don't have to. And that's why it says lo yicha. He doesn't have to. That's why it says in the future. It should have said either in the present. If you notice, it says all the servants, all the king's servants and all the king's men bow down or are bowing down. But Mordechai lo yicha does not have to, will not have to. So one way of saying is that he refused to. That's one way to interpret the Hebrew. Another way to interpret the Hebrew, that it's in the future tense, is that the king gave him a special dispensation. He doesn't have to. Does that make sense? That Mordechai will not have to. And again, this interpretation, which you could say is a midrashic, meaning it's not exactly written in the text, but it sort of is, if you notice that there's a difference in tenses. So it's just, to me, I don't know if this is a sign of anti-Semitism, but it does seem odd that we know about Mordechai overtly saving the king's life, being absolutely loyal to the king, and the king's response is, I'm going to raise up Haman.
But I'm just,
Yes.
I'm confused because if I remember the Megillah, he only finds out when he can't sleep one night and he has the Chronicles read to him. So I don't know whether it was presented to him that
No,
Mordechai.
that's not, that's not 100% true. Because if you look back on chapter 1, verse 23, it says, "Vayikatev b'sifrei divrei hayamim lifnei hamelech." It was written in the book in front of the king. And we discussed last time, why does it have to say in front of the king? Well, usually it wasn't written in front of the king. It's just that somebody, and by the way, it does say, Vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordechai. Esther told the king in the name of Mordechai. She told the king that it was Mordechai who discovered it. So we know the king knows. What the king doesn't remember, first of all, he forgot. And when he can't sleep and he opens up the Chronicles, what does he ask? He says, oh yeah, when that guy Mordechai did that, did he ever get rewarded? That's his question, Debbie.
Right. All right. You're right. And I see that and I forgot that. But also maybe even Lifnei Hamelech, you imagine that things are read. And, you know,
No, it was written. It was written in
what-
front of the king.
was he attending to it? Or was Haman presenting it like, you know, or, you know, oh, this happened and I was there.
Wait a minute, Haman, one second. Haman wasn't in 21, 22, and
No, I
23.
know, but I'm saying in the world of the king, is it possible that like this, you know, Haman promoted himself, you know, like, oh, you know,
Oh, you're saying separate from. I'm just
Yes.
interesting that it says "Achar hadvarim ha'ele," after these events happen. So yes, the Midrash interprets it that Haman married Zeresh. She was very wealthy, and we know he's wealthy. How do we know that Haman is wealthy? Because when we'll see soon that when he tries to convince the king to eradicate the Jews, he just said like nonchalantly, oh, and by the way, I'm going to deposit these gazillion billion dollars in your account, you know, as if like just happenstance. But of course, that's going to convince the king, right? Money speaks very, very loudly. Okay. I want to see if there's anything else that I wanted to say here. There is something else that I would like to say, but before I do that, I'm not sure I want to go into that. I want to pause for a moment and say, let's say we didn't have the midrashic explanation that Ahasuerus said that that Mordechai doesn't have to bow to Haman. So I want to ask the people on this group, why is Mordechai not bowing to Haman? I once asked this of my class I taught in Baltimore, and I got like 30 answers. And I thought it would be really interesting to take a poll here about why you think Mordechai did not bow.
He
Helen.
didn't bow down because he knew that Haman was a descendant of Agag, and so because he knew that, he wouldn't bow down to him because of the because of the everlasting battle between Israel and Agag.
Okay, thank you, Lance. 1 second, and then Marvin. Yeah.
My understanding is that the Persians always bowed down to a higher man. In other words, if you were a lieutenant, you bowed down to a general, whereas the Greeks only bowed down to a god, just like in the book of Daniel. The Jews only do not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. So what some scholars think is that the Megillah is actually an attack on Persians by
But now,
Greeks.
wait, I don't understand. What does that have to do with Mordechai not bowing down? I just want an answer to that question right now.
Because Mordechai's not bowing down makes sense in the context, historically, of Greeks and Persians and what each
He
one
was
does.
Greek? He was Greek?
According to some scholars, yes.
Got it. So here's the thing. Why would he bow down to Ahasuerus and not to Haman is the question. Doesn't say he didn't bow down to the king. It says he doesn't bow down to Haman.
Because Haman is a superior.
All right, but so is the king.
But he
Okay,
gets, wait a minute. He gets punished for not, does he get punished for not bowing down to Ahasuerus?
No, he does bow down to Ahasuerus, but why
Oh, he
doesn't
does
he
bow
bow
down,
down
okay.
to Haman?
Right, but he doesn't bow down to Haman, and Haman is the bad guy in this case.
No,
In other
that's
words,
so you're
right?
saying it's just a farce and it's done to set it up. Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay,
The Megillah
okay.
is it's not my, these are not my
No,
positions.
no. I got it, Lance. I want to give other people an opportunity. So you
Okay.
think that it's because Haman is the bad guy, so therefore it has to be. Okay, Marvin wanted to say something.
I think halachically, Jews don't bow down to anybody. Even when you say Baruch Atah Hashem, you stand up before you say Hashem.
Correct, but what about to the king? It sounds like he bowed down to the king, but not to
Where-
Haman.
where did he
The
bow
only
down to
reason
the
I'm
king?
saying, it doesn't say that he bows down to the king. However, if he didn't bow down to the king, he would be punished for that. So it's
That's an implication.
it's an implication, but it
nowhere
seems
does it say-
obvious. No, you don't think so? If the king passed by and he didn't bow down to the king?
Where is it mentioned in the Haggadah?
No, it's not.
In
No, no,
Haggadah
I
eight?
agree it's not mentioned, but I think we understand it implicitly because otherwise it says that he specifically doesn't bow down to Haman. It doesn't say anything about not bowing down to the king. So and the king wouldn't have people bow down to Haman and not to himself. So I feel like it's pretty, to me, it feels really clear. I mean, you could say differently. You could say, no, he didn't bow down to anybody, but why does it say he doesn't bow down to Haman, and it doesn't say why didn't you bow down to the king? Yeah, Ruby. But I'm hearing that.
If Mordecai bows down to Haman, isn't that giving Haman semi-kingly status? So you wouldn't want anybody to bow down that way.
Wait, but
It's
why?
only the king you should be bowing down to.
What do you mean you? You, who is you? Because all the servants bow down to Haman.
Does that make any sense?
Wait, Ruby, did you hear my question? No,
No.
you didn't hear my question. The king ordered that everybody has to bow down to Haman. So everybody did except for Mordecai. So who shouldn't have kingly status? The Jews? I'm not understanding your point. Do you mean the Jewish people are allowed to bow down to a king, but not to anybody else?
Yeah.
So that's what you're taking that as a
Yeah.
premise.
I mean,
But
if I
we're
was the king, that I would want it. That who would bow down to me, that people would bow down to me, but not bow down to others,
Yeah, but it says that
because I'm the king. If they bow
But
down
Ruby-
to others, in the way they're giving others semi-kingly status.
I know, but Ruby, it was the king's edict to bow down to Haman. The king is the one who issued that edict. It says right here, "Tichen siva lo hamelech," because the king is the one. The king is the one who issued the edict to bow down to Haman. The question is, why did Mordecai not bow down to Haman?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you.
I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of a class. Can you wait till the end?
I'm just waiting for trying to find the office.
The office is right around the corner. Yep, no problem. Yes. Does that make sense, Ruby?
Oh,
Yeah, it does, but okay.
I mean,
Did you-
I don't know why the king agreed to do that everybody has to bow down
Right.
to Haman. But the question
Maybe
is,
that's what-
why did Mordecai think it's okay not to bow down to Haman? Yes, Karen.
Well, just a clarification. Did you say before that Achashverosh told him he didn't have to?
No, I said that is one midrash.
Oh, a midrash.
Yeah.
So if the only thing that I can think of is, we know Hashem's name is not in the Megillah. And we do understand that Yad Hashem can be seen throughout the Megillah. So perhaps this was also something to do with Yad Hashem, that Mordecai would not bow down. It was kind of part of the story, and
Yeah.
each step was Yad Hashem.
Yep. That is definitely a lens that somehow God planted that. Because
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it seems that if Mordecai doesn't bow down and he's the only one, it sounds like other Jews did. Right? Unless there were 0 Jews in Shushan, other Jews did bow down. So he's the only one who had, so to speak, the courage. And what Karen is suggesting, well, maybe God planted that courage in order for the events to unfold. So that is absolutely a lens that we can look at it. But here is the thing that anybody else want to say something? Because I can't. Judy, you just unmute. I don't see everybody. So just unmute and speak, please.
Okay. Isn't there a midrash, or am I wrong, that on the robe of Haman there was an idol, and he didn't want to bow down to that idol on his robe?
Yeah, exactly. There is a midrash, and now we see where the midrash comes from. It's like, well, we don't understand. The ones who wrote the midrash said, we don't understand why Mordecai didn't bow down to Haman, because wherever Dina Malchuta Dina. Did anybody ever hear Dina Malchuta Dina? Did anybody ever hear that phrase?
Yes.
So Dina is din, meaning the law or the rule. Malchuta is Malchut is kingdom or whatever country you're living in. Dina Malchuta Dina, you have to follow the rules of the country that you're living in. So if, I mean, I guess on pain of killing people, you know, the three biggies, which one is,
Yeah,
well, I guess idol worship, right? So one of those is killing people, one of those is having incestuous relationships, and I think the other one is idol worship. So that's where it came from, this midrash, that maybe Haman specifically was wearing something that was an idol, and therefore Mordechai didn't have to bow down to him, because otherwise it doesn't make sense that he doesn't bow down to him. Again, Marvin, going back to your point, that's another way of saying, but then it must be that he bowed down to the king. Otherwise, where is that written? Why doesn't it say that the servant said, Mordechai, why are you not bowing down to the king? They only said it about Haman, and that's where that midrash comes from, that he had an idol around his neck, and that Mordechai didn't want to bow down to the idol. Thank you, Judy, for reminding me of that. Yeah.
I have to say that little children in school, I had a little song for my grandson Shabtai. It was it's because I'm a Jew, I don't bow down. So that from the little 4-year-old, that's what he's learning.
No,
But
so
you-
that's, I get that, except what about all the other Jews? Did they bow down?
I don't know. That's what he sang the song to me. But I was
Yes,
just,
but-
it's what they learn. That's what they teach.
Yep. Yep. No comments. I'm not saying it's wrong. I get that. We don't bow down to people today, so it's a little bit unusual. You know, it's hard for us to tap into that. Okay. So if we go to, so I'm actually interspersing these sources, especially since you can't see them anyway, with
Question.
with there are more midrashim that I might tell you about as I go on. Just 1 minute. Yeah. So Pasuk Gimel, the third verse. Vayomru avdei hamelech asher b'shar hamelech. The servants of the king who were in the gate of the king, they said to Mordechai, Madua ta'overet mitzvat hamelech. Why are you transgressing the king's command? But by the way, there's no answer to this. Mordechai doesn't answer. That's why all these midrashim, like what the Megillah should have quoted Mordechai's answer. Everybody with me on that? And that's really interesting that the Megillah didn't. Any ideas about that?
He didn't want to say that he was a Jew. I mean,
Maybe.
know,
Yep. Maybe he didn't want to say that he was a Jew. Yep. That makes sense. But guess what? They knew. And here we're going to find that in verse 4. Vayihi be'omram, which is also ke'omram. It's written one way and read another way. Elab yom vayom velo shama lehem. He didn't listen. So maybe it was a rhetorical question. Like, how come you're not doing that? Not because they wanted the answer. What are you, an idiot? What are you, why are you being subversive, I would say. Velo shama lehem. He didn't listen to them. Vayagidu leHaman. So maybe Haman didn't notice it until they told him. You know, there's throngs of people, although it's hard to miss if everybody is bowing down. Did anybody ever seen pictures? I don't have the book with me, the book with pictures, but the one with pictures would show all these throngs of people prostrating, and then one person is sticking up out of the crowd. So I don't know how Haman missed it, but they told him. So they were very happy to create trouble for Mordechai. Lirot hayamdu divrei Mordechai, meaning to see if the words of Mordechai, I don't know what that means. Does anybody have a good translation for that? Lirot hayamdu divrei Mordechai. Would they be sustained? I'm not sure. Now, divrei Mordechai means his words, which we haven't quoted yet. They never quoted his words in the Megillah. But what does it say? Ki higid lahem asher hu Yehudi. So here's your answer. By the way, that's what Debbie, that's where it's from. He told them that he's a Jew. So look at this pasuk. Can we take apart this pasuk? Anybody have thoughts about this pasuk? Read it in the English. It's specifically pointing out that he is Jewish. This is now, for the first time, we're really seeing that it's pitting Jew And
Yeah.
of course, it goes back to Agag,
Hmm.
to the Amalek, right?
Yeah.
Asher hu yudi. Yeah, Vivian, what did you want to say?
It occurs to me that once they found out he's Jewish, they blamed all the Jews. That suddenly, when one person does something wrong, it somehow reflects on the entire group.
Yeah, 100%. We're about to get to that. Thank you. That's in Pasuk Vav. That's true. Anybody else have a thought about that? Because it's so interesting that it says they wanted to see if his words would be sustained. Why? Because he told them that he was a Jew. So it's really opaque. What does that phrase mean? But it seems to be connected to the fact that he's a Jew. So is it about, well, we're going to point it out? We're going to tell on him? I don't know.
I think it's the anti-Semitism already that you've been speaking about.
Yeah. To me, that seems like a more overt.
Yeah.
Right. Until now, we've been see more by Midrashim. This is the first time that it seems more
Yeah.
overt, the anti-Semitism.
You know,
Yeah.
he's a Jew, he's not going
Right.
to buy it down.
What's going to happen? Right. He's a Jew. We're going to get him. Something's
Yeah.
going to, right.
Exactly.
And they're kind of waiting with bated breath to see, wait, what's going to happen? He's Jewish. What's going to happen? So it's interesting to me. It was the first time I read this Midrash that King Ahasuerus had given him a pass because, which does connect very nicely, because it was Achar Advarim Ha'eleh. After these things came to pass, when Mordechai did such a favor and such a, is it a favor? A service, rather, to the king, he was very loyal to the king, right? He could have let Bigtan and Teresh kill the king, but he didn't. So after that happened, that and Ahasuerus actually lifted up Haman. So he's still giving a nod to Mordechai by saying, but you don't have to, because I know that you're loyal to me. I'm going to allow you to be, so to speak, on the same level, and that you do not have to bow down, right? So that was an interesting midrash for me to learn. But maybe Haman didn't know about it, that the Ahasuerus had given Mordechai a pass, or maybe he didn't care. And again, going to what Vivian said, Asher hu Yehudi, Vayar Haman kein Mordechai koreh mishtachave lo. So only after people pointed it out, now every time he passes by, he looks and to see, is there a person not bowing down? And now he sees that Mordechai is not bowing down. Vaymalei Haman chema. And Haman became full of fury. And here we go. This is a really an important pasuk. Vayives be'einav, it was contemptible in his eyes, lishloach yad b'Mordechai b'vado, to just lay his hand, meaning give him some sort of punishment. Lishloach yad means to take control of him, to have power, right, by putting his hand. Livado, only him, ki higidu lo et am Mordechai, because they told him who his nation is. So he's like, oh, I'm not just going to get back at Mordechai. And therefore, he wants to eradicate, destroy all the Jews. Asher b'chol malchut Achashverosh am Mordechai. In all of Achashverosh's kingdom, all of Mordechai's nation, who has nothing to do with Mordechai and what he did. And maybe all of them, when they came, would prostrate themselves and bow down. And that, I think, is the first overt sign of anti-Semitism. And more, and I'll say more, but I want to know if anybody has any thoughts.
Don't you think part of it had to do with the jealousy? If Mordechai was put on the same level as Haman, and he didn't have to bow because they were the same level, he all of a sudden saw that he was not so special, Haman. His position wasn't that.
Yeah, but why is that justify going after the whole nation?
Well, because he's an anti-Semite.
Well, there you go. Right. No, I'm not disagreeing. It came from jealousy. Maybe it came from insecurity, but the fact that he had the power and the desire to go to not even like Mordechai and his family, right? Or Mordechai and all the Jews in Shushan, or Mordechai, something like that. It was Mordechai's whole people in all the 127 provinces. That was what he was going to go to. That was what he's going to reach out to and try to kill.
I thought.
Yeah, a thought. Who said that?
Yeah. I did. Okay. How
Oh,
do we
Judith, yeah.
think this on the last word of pasuk hey lo yamalei Haman chema? The word Hamas, just fill that in for chema.
Wait, hold on one second. First of all, lo vayimale is not the good way to parse it. It's ki ein Mordechai koreo mishtachave lo.
Right.
That Mordechai doesn't bow down lo to him. And the last three words are their own phrase. Vayimale Haman chema. And Haman was filled with anger.
But
Now, what was your
doesn't that word chema echo nowadays of Hamas?
chema and Hamas? I think Hamas is not a Hebrew word, though. I think it's an Arabic word.
But you agree it sounds the same, especially today. No, the stretch.
I mean, yeah, it could be. I don't remember what Hamas means. I think we spoke about that. It means
Doesn't-
something in Arabic.
Anger and violence.
I'll see.
No,
what it
Hamas Hamas in the Hebrew word means violence. And yes, that is true. But, and I agree that Hamas in Hebrew and Chema have a common source. That makes sense because extreme anger can lead to violence. That I agree. I just think Hamas is an Arabic word. So yeah, it sounds like it, but I can't tell you that they come from the same source because one is in Arabic and one is in Hebrew.
It says
Yes,
here,
Debbie.
Hamas is an acronym of the Arabic phrase, something, Islamic Resistance Movement. This acronym was later glossed into the 1988 Hamas Covenant by the Arabic world, Hamas, which itself means zeal, strength, or bravery.
Zeal, strength, or bravery. So that's not exactly violence. I mean, you could say it comes from a similar root, but I mean, it's fine, Judy, if you think that. And of course, we all hear the echo. I just can't prove that it comes from same because it's a different language, unless you wanted to say something else about it.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. And okay. And now what happens? So anybody have anything else to say before moving on to verse 7? Okay. B'chodesh harishon u'chodesh Nisan. So it's now the month of Nisan in the 12th. Wait, what time is it? Oh, it's almost. I think since we only have 2 minutes left, I think we're going to stop at this. You know what? Let's just stop at 7, and then we'll start with 8 next time. B'chodesh harishon u'chodesh Nisan. We're now in Nisan, which, by the way, already I'm telling you that the fast that the Jews tore their clothes and fasted, and the fast of Esther, that happened in Nisan, which is 10 or 11 months before Purim. That's when he drew the lots. So this is in the 12th year. Do we remember? I just want to remember, when did he throw a party? Bishnat Shalosh, in the 3rd year. So we're already from 3 to 12. We already have 9 years have passed from the first chapter. Everybody with me? Because sometimes we think it all happened in a couple of months. It's actually already 9 years. So we're going to move into the 10th year because remember, Adar happens the following year, right? Nisan is next month, the Pesach month. So that was when this happened with Mordechai. That was when it happened with Bigtan and Teresh. A lot of time has passed. Remember, because he had the party and then Vashti and then until they did the beauty pageant, until they brought the girls in, and until they had 6 months in the, frankincense and 6 months in the ritual bath. And then he picked Esther. All of that happened. He drew lots, who are goral. It's the lot. Lifnei Haman, miyom liyom or michodesh lechodesh, from day to day and month to month, meaning he picked a month and a day. And then what did he get to? Chodesh Nemasar, the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. It's interesting to think. I don't know if he used Jewish months, but I think Babylonian months, and that goes a little bit back to what Lance is saying. This connects to our history. But our months they're based on Babylonian names. So maybe they were using the same months at the time. Chodesh Adar. And that's how he got to the month of Adar. We don't have the day yet here, I don't think. And next time we will pick up on the next pasuk, which give you a little teaser, it's false news. One of the first examples of false news. And what we didn't say yet, which I think is a beautiful teaching, although it's not specifically about anti-Semitism, is where is the root? Where do we see a hint to the word Haman in the Torah? So that's something we're going to talk about next time. And then I have a wonderful letter, which is a midrash that Rabbi Eliyahu Kito brought down or copy, in his book. Next week, I hope to have a computer that's working and I'll be able to read it to you. And it's an amazing letter that uses little bits of truth to build a lot of false news. All right, my friends, thanks for bearing with me with all my technological issues. Next week, hope to be in a better state, but thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everybody. Be well. Take
Thank
good
you.
care.
Yeah,
Bye.
Yeah, you too.
bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Mm. Yeah, bye.